Welcome to The Explainer. So, let's start with a question. What makes a politician run for president not once, not twice, but 6 times? Today, we're going to break down the career of Atiku Abubakar, one of Nigeria's most persistent and, controversial political figures, to try and figure that out. 6. That's the number. That's how many times one man has run for president of Nigeria. It makes him one of the most relentless and, you could argue, influential figures in the nation's entire democratic history. So, who is the man behind that number? Well, today, we're unpacking the story of Atiku Abubakar. He's a businessman, a former vice president, and a constant candidate whose ambition has really shaped Nigerian politics for decades now. We're going to follow his journey through 4 key stages to really understand the arc of his political quest. We'll start with his early days in the civil service and take it all the way to his most recent run for the presidency. Okay, let's dive right in. You know, to really understand the politician, you first have to understand the businessman, because this is where Atiku built his entire foundation. And I'm not just talking about a financial empire, but a whole network of influence that would end up fueling his political ambitions for years and years to come. So for 2 decades, Atiku Abubakar was a customs officer. A pretty solid career, right? But here's the thing. At the very same time, he was laying the groundwork for a huge business empire. It started small, with a single rental property, and then it ballooned into the super lucrative oil logistics business. And when you look at his business interests, they are all over the place. I mean, from manufacturing to even founding a private university. But it's his stake in Intel's, which, remember, he co-founded while he was still a customs officer, that's been both the jackpot for his immense fortune and a huge source of controversy. Okay, so he's built the business empire. He's got his foundation. Now he's ready for the big leagues. And that brings us to his entry into the highest level of Nigerian politics, becoming vice president right at the start of the Fourth Republic. His 8 years as vice president under Olusegun Obasanjo were really a tale of 2 halves. The first term started with a clear focus on economic reform, especially privatization. But that teamwork? It just completely fell apart in the second term, which was basically defined by this massive, very public political fight with his own boss. So what was the big flashpoint here? Well, it all came down to the third-term agenda. This was the alleged plan by President Obasanjo to change the constitution so he could run for a 3rd term. And Atiku Abubakar made himself one of the most powerful people in the country to publicly stand against it. And Atiku himself tells this story of a pretty dramatic showdown, framing his opposition as a fight for democracy itself. This clash didn't just define his second term, it really set the stage for his own presidential dreams, forcing him to find a new path to power outside of the ruling party. So with his time as VP over, Atiku begins this long, really winding quest for the top job itself, a journey that would end up spanning decades and a whole bunch of different political parties. And look at this timeline. What's so wild is just how persistent he's been for decades. I mean, he was contesting for the presidency even before he became VP back in 1993. He's been in almost every single election cycle since, which shows a level of political endurance that is, well, it's pretty remarkable. You know, a huge part of his story has been his willingness to switch parties to get what he wants. He's moved between all the major political players of the day, which has earned him a reputation as a master political pragmatist. This kind of party hopping might seem strange, but in Nigerian politics, it's actually pretty common. Ideology sometimes takes a backseat to just getting things done. And this chart, it really drives home one of his most critical contests. So in 2014, he helps form the opposition party, the APC, and then he runs for its presidential ticket. Now, Muhammadu Buhari was the clear winner, but look how close Atiku was to second place. He lost out on being the runner-up by just 20 votes. I mean, that's razor thin. Fast forward 4 years. He's back in the PDP, and this time, he crushes it. He wins the nomination decisively, getting more than double the votes of his closest rival. That victory set him up as the main challenger to President Buhari in the 2019 election. So that big primary win puts him closer to the presidency than he's ever been. But to really get the full picture, to understand both his enduring appeal and the hurdles he's always faced, we have to look beyond just the campaigns at 2 things that have really defined him: his ideology and the controversies that just seem to follow him. For years, he's been a really loud voice for what he calls true federalism. Think of it this way. Right now, a lot of the money in Nigeria flows to the central government in Abuja, which then hands it out to the states. Atiku argues that states should be more like their own economic engines, keeping more of what they generate. The whole idea is to make each state responsible for its own success, right? To get them competing and innovating. Okay, now we have to be really clear about this part. Atiku himself was never, ever charged with a crime in the US or in Nigeria related to this case. But you know how it is in the court of public opinion. The damage was done. Those vivid details, cash in a freezer, that stuff sticks. It created a political stain that his opponents have used against him again and again in almost every election. So when you step back, his story is really one of these incredible contrasts. He's a public servant who became a private tycoon, a party loyalist who became a master of switching parties, and an economic reformer who has been constantly followed by these allegations of corruption. After all this time, after all of these campaigns, his quest for the presidency is still unfinished. And that leaves us with the big question: what will his ultimate legacy be? Will he be remembered as a democratic champion, a master political strategist, or simply the perennial contender? That remains one of Nigeria's most fascinating open questions.